Hello. I'm streaming this right now. I wasn't planning on making this video. In fact, I actually had planned for the end of the year something called Cheers and Jeers, where I was going to talk about all the different teams and what I thought they did right and what they didn't. I was going to talk about this there, but here we are because guess what? I just woke up and World quarterfinals are beginning soon. We know that 100 Thieves isn't moving on, and there is a 100 Thieves disappointment thread on Reddit, and Nadeshot's responding elsewhere and all this stuff. So talks a lot about a lot of the things that I was planning on talking about. We're going to just do this live on stream, and sorry for the production issues. Anyway, this is technically Worlds content because I'm at Worlds, and it's about a Worlds thing, so I'm going to give a shout-out happily to my sponsor, U.GG. Thanks for covering my travel and expenses and all this stuff over here and helping to sponsor the Worlds coverage. All right, so this 100 Thieves thing I think has been brewing for quite some time. It really started in my mind whenever the media thing happened at the beginning of Summer Split. Very popular player left. There wasn't too much conversation from the org. Then, obviously we had the Cody Sun Rikara stuff. Now we're at Worlds. So it doesn't really surprise me to see this stuff coming. It just kind of blew up. It was basically like a powder keg or pressure cooker, right? Like they lost in glorious fashion, and then we end up with all this stuff going on. Before I start this, I do want to say, actually, and I think actually a lot of people would agree with me, 100 Thieves is probably one of the best things that's happened in franchising. The things that they've been able to do as an organization, the brand that they've been able to build for themselves, they have far surpassed most, I would say they've definitely beat out Clutch and Golden Guardians and Optic for presentation, what they've been able to accomplish, content, et cetera, et cetera. So that's actually one of the reasons why this is so disappointing, because I feel like they're in danger of squandering most of the goodwill that they've gained and most of what they've done here. And quite frankly, it's a pretty easy answer to this because I think it's pretty easily avoided. I named this video 100 Problems for 100 Thieves, but that's actually just because it's a great goddamn headline. It's actually about one problem, which is communication. And I know, everybody's like, oh yeah, obviously communication, they should just solve this better. But let me explain in depth what the whole point is around that thing. So 100 Thieves is a team that bet really heavily on Nadeshot's brand, right? Like Nadeshot came in, he partnered up with folks from the Cavs, and they built out this organization. It worked great. I was actually really skeptical that they could translate Nadeshot's Call of Duty brand over to League of Legends, but I think it went really well. Starting off with the first interview I ever did with Nadeshot, which was in December, I want to say, maybe December, I think, before Scouting Grounds. And just found him to be super charismatic, captivating individual, super passionate. Continue to think that dude's just a legendary dude, right? And so they kind of built up this idea that Nadeshot's the face of the organization, he's the leader, etc. They didn't really talk about any other people at the organization ever. You don't really know, who else works at 100 Thieves. I know, because I know the guys, but for the most part, you might know Gabe, if you follow along, maybe you've seen some of the people that are in his Instagram. But from a general Reddit audience type of perspective, 100 Thieves is Nadeshot. That's the leadership team. So Nadeshot basically was doing this stuff. In fact, in the video, he said he was going to be at LCS every week. Every day of LCS, he said that in my interview at the end of last year, and I think he did a pretty good job of that. I think he missed a couple. Maybe one of them was for the wedding of one of his best friends. Makes sense. I don't care. That's fine. But then you start to get into some complicated moments for the organization, right? They've built out all the stuff, they've done all the stuff, they made it to finals in the spring split, and then summer comes around, issues start to pop up. So the Meteos thing happens, and there's no conversation around any of it from the organization side, right? Maybe a little tweet or something like that, but there's just no conversation. They basically let Meteos control the whole narrative, and of course the player's never going to tell you the full narrative. Not to say that they needed to get into he said, she said about what's going on, but it was really bizarre to get kind of these weird, unexplained situations from Meteos where he's this happened, and we don't really understand the full context. And I think at the time their show maybe went dark for that week. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look it up. But I remember thinking, even if it didn't go dark, it didn't really address the Meteos thing. And then you end up in the Cody Sun situation. And again, Cody Sun is controlling the narrative which is saying that he stayed at home, etc. Now, maybe that's what happened. It probably is what happened. I'm not saying that you need to get out there, but like when your audience is only learning what is happening in these really controversial moments from like a twit longer or a tweet or some sort of confused message from a player, it's really hard to understand what's happening. But anyway, you've got the players basically putting out their stuff. And here's the thing about the League of Legends community specifically. The League of Legends community, as with all gaming communities, but more with League of Legends, expects prompt communication and transparency. You know why? Because this is what Riot has basically instilled in them. Ever since the devs started going out onto the forums, ever since you started having like these bigger conversations, take a look at EU LCS threads. EU LCS threads, Quick Shot or Shocks usually shows up whenever there's some confusion about something or some applause or whatever. In my interviews, if somebody's upset about something, I go in and try to explain something. Jack had some stuff that happened earlier this year with Cloud9, obviously, and he was going into the Cloud9 subreddit to like talk about stuff. This was something Reaper even said whenever he made the roster changes. He said that after he was done with that, he said basically that if he could change one thing about how he handled the roster decisions, it would be to be even more transparent with the audience. The community has an expectation of transparency, and they distrust anything that is not transparent because of just the culture that Riot has created, and one that's been embraced by like the different LCS owners and influencers and all that kind of stuff. So look, okay, everybody's saying the audio is fine, so we're going to continue. So that is really dangerous then to not communicate. Now, I don't know I don't know entirely why they didn't communicate. I think Nadeshot has tweeted recently about basically trying to protect the players. You can tell a story about what is going on without throwing your players under the bus. I think you can say, even if it's just sort of generic conversations around like, oh, we had this, there were internal team conflicts, it was fine. Like you can have those conversations, you can communicate without just ignoring the audience, you know. Now, if they had made these changes and not communicated about them, and the organization had started to find great success, everything would have probably been fine. The problem is they started to struggle, right? So now your favorite team is struggling, and you've made changes that are unpopular. No one understands why you're making the changes. And it's not even just that you need to come out and explain the changes. No one is telling the story of the team. Admittedly, you've got the heist, but you don't have like a figure that is out there on Reddit, on Twitter, in interviews that can talk about this. Great example. Whenever the Meteos change happened, I requested an interview with anybody on the leadership team. I was told that Nadeshot was the only person that could handle that, and Nadeshot was not there. You know, the other folks that are part of the leadership, they don't do interviews. That's basically what I was told. And anyway, so there was no interview around the Meteos stuff, right? And I would have liked to. Again, Jack was able to do an interview with me about the crazy roster changes he made at the beginning of the year. If you remember, at the beginning of the split. If you remember, that was the one that I did with him and his father on Father's Day, and we discussed like why he was doing all this stuff. So, and that interview, by the way, got hundreds of thousands of views, I think. If I recall, I'd have to go back and look at it, but it got tremendous viewership. You know why? Because people wanted to understand what was happening, and Jack was able to do it in in an eloquent way, I think. He probably talked a little bit more about what was going on with the players than Nadeshot would want to, but he did it, right? And so then C9 fans at least knew what the reasoning was, even if they didn't appreciate it. Later on, by the way, they would go on to appreciate it. Now, we get to Worlds, and it just feels like there's no one who can really help hype up the org. There's no one out there saying, like, this is the story of us. Sorry, I know this is shaking. This is the story of us. Because the audience is on Reddit, they're elsewhere, and they've written off this organization from a competitive standpoint this year. People, after Team Liquid lost, I went into the Reddit threads, and people were saying, well, good luck, C9. They weren't even saying it sarcastically to dog on 100T. They had just, like, moved on from 100T because there was nobody out there that was able to say, like, look, guys, odds are against us. Here's what's going on. Here's why we need your support. Here's why we want you to be there for us. There's nobody out there that can really cheerlead for the team or take ownership or try to, like, rally the fans. Nothing like that happened. So they're just there with intense community scrutiny, no support from the audience, in my opinion. Yeah, there were some dedicated 100T fans here and there, but I think the general League of Legends audience had rejected them in a way that they haven't rejected other teams in the past, really, at Worlds. Like, it was actually really unique to me. Nobody had ever... Like, I've been covering this for 7 years, right? This is my 7th Worlds. And I just have never seen such a rejection of a team competitively at Worlds. And it's, again, because there's just nobody there to talk about it. So I want to show you guys something, because this is sort of my final example that really like brings in the whole picture. At last year I did TSM went out, right, of groups, and it was awful because everybody had bet on them and people were hopeful. And so I requested an interview with Reginald, and I did this interview. It's currently sitting at 260,000 views, sorry. And it was, I think, a great interview. People really applauded the fact that he was able to come out and talk about like how difficult it was. He didn't have answers. He didn't have great things to say, but like he went out there and owned it. He owned the loss. He talked about how tough it was, etc. So because that interview was really successful, and I found it was a great way that like whenever an NA team goes out, you can talk to like the leadership to, you know, figure out what's going on. I decided to continue that trend. I was like, at groups, I'm going to interview folks about this. So I interviewed Jack. This interview's not up on the YouTube channel yet, but it will be in a couple of hours, I guess my late nighttime, your morning. And Jack talked about what the win meant, etc. Maybe more important than that interview, I interviewed Steve after the loss, and that's probably sitting at like 35K views or whatever, but Steve was able to talk about all the stuff that they try to do to make this year work. The effort that they put into the mental training of the players, what they were going to do, what the whole experience meant to him. You got a sense of like, this is what it was like for Team Liquid this year. And this is what this Worlds meant. And I got to say, I knew Nadeshot wasn't at Worlds, which is actually okay. So some people might think I'm going to blast him for being not at Worlds. I am actually kind of surprised that Steve and Jack spend weeks of their time to come here, because esports has grown up tremendously. These orgs have many different teams. They've got a lot of different business stuff. I actually think it's pretty impressive that these guys come over here for multiple weeks at a time to support their teams. But in the event that they didn't come over here, I'm sure they would have like a GM or somebody here, right? And that's true. 100T actually did have other leadership here. Like Nadeshot had to handle some other stuff. That makes perfect sense to me. They had other leadership here. The problem is that when I messaged a contact at 100T to ask if I could do an interview with somebody from the leadership team, they said they'd look into it. I never got back. They never got back to me because there's nobody else. There's nobody other than Nadeshot. And so you need like a general manager or somebody who can take ownership of that situation and be the person like, I am here. I am the presence. Here's what you could do in the interview before Worlds starts and talk about it. By the way, it doesn't need to be an interview. I know everybody's going to be like, Travis just wanted his interview. That's why he's doing this video. No, it could be a vlog. It could be something that like social media updates where somebody's on camera talking about what's happening. They could do a written interview with somebody else. It doesn't need to be a media thing. It doesn't need to be something that's happened with press. I think that's, obviously I'm biased. I think that's like actually a great way to go about it, but you can come up with a different strategy. But what happened? What did we see from 100T this year at Worlds? We saw the heist and sort of that trying to tell a story, but did we see any leadership really talk about them going over there from outside of the heist? Were there any interviews? Was there like a rallying cry? After Worlds ended, we haven't seen anything except, and here's where Nadeshot does talk about it. That Reddit thread pops up, and Nadeshot went on stream. Let's see if this loads. It might show a commercial because I'm doing this live. But Nadeshot goes on stream. You guys can check this out. It's up on Reddit. It's up on the 100T thing, and he addresses the conversation, which is great. Like, it's great to be able to have a system where the owner of a team is able to so directly interact with his audience, right? I think it's really cool that that's the case. The problem is that it's a rant that is occurring in the middle of a Call of Duty match. He's fragging people while talking about this stuff, and it's not the most thoughtful form. If you want to go look at what he says, there's like a transcription of it up on the 100T subreddit, and in it, he ironically admits that there are PR issues. They didn't do the greatest job with PR this year, and I just gotta say, it's not great to be addressing the fact that you've struggled with PR and to be doing that in a rant during a Call of Duty match. So it's I think Nadeshot is so impressive, and what he's been able to build with 100 Thieves is great. This is just very clearly like the biggest flaw that org has right now, and I really worry that it's holding it back. So what are some solutions? I want to make sure I addressed everything I want to talk to. Yeah. What are some solutions for 100T? One, I think every team should hire a PR person. I hate that they haven't yet. I think everybody's hired like marketing people and salespeople, and they've got mental coaches and all that stuff. But very few people have, very few teams have PR folks. I think in North America, I want to say the only ones that I know of are Team Liquid and Echo Fox. And you would think that I would be the person that would know if there are PR people. So maybe there are, but if there are, they're not interacting with me in a great way. So unless I'm forgetting someone. Anyway, so having a PR person would be a great first step. But even if you don't get a PR person, 100T really needs to identify another person on the leadership team who can be the face of that organization, whether it's a general manager or whether it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to remember if Nadeshot is the president or whatever. But if he's the president, then a CEO or a COO, vice versa. You just need to have somebody else out there who can have these conversations and really address the stuff. And the like post-Worlds moment for 100T addressing this stuff can't be Nadeshot getting angry at Reddit on his stream while playing Call of Duty. That just can't be the case. And he wouldn't be in a situation if 100T had been able to have conversations much earlier. So anyway, I know that this is normally like, look, Broden's off. It's his day off. I can't. It'd be difficult for me to like grab him. The conversation's going, so I did this live. I want to say I hope that none of this, if 100T is watching it, comes across as rude or judgmental or whatever. This isn't me backtracking. This is just legitimately like, if I was to sit down with somebody, I would say like, you guys are fucking killing it everywhere except for this one thing, and you gotta fix it, because you are like literally the coolest thing to happen to our league from an organization standpoint since like the original teams started to fall into place, in my opinion. Like nobody else has hit that, and if you just nail this, you're gonna be so fucking awesome, like unstoppable potentially. You know, you could surpass all your rivals. And I want to see that, because you doing that will challenge everybody else to be better. And it's so sad for me that like your org has done so much this year, and then it ends on this like really sour note where 100T flunks out of Worlds. No one understands the context for a lot of the decisions that were made, and the only word we have is like a kind of hostile rant about how some stupid people on Reddit don't think that you should be building merchandise. I think it's great to build merchandise, but you need to be able to tell the story of your team outside of just the heist, and you know, have people understand what's going on. Anyway, that's my story. I hope you guys have enjoyed that. Sorry if it was a rambly at times or whatever, but we did it live because I had to do it, and this was the way I could. You should also check out u.gg, by the way. They're my sponsor for Worlds, and there's a link to them in the description. If you enjoy my content, you should check that out. If you want to perform better in your solo queue than North America has done so far at Worlds, you can click that link. You don't need a coach or an analyst or anything like that to find out. Chat going crazy about u.gg. You don't need a coach or an analyst or anything like that to figure out how to do picks and bans, because they've got all the information there for you. You can figure out counters, you can figure out builds and all that kind of stuff. You'll make sure you never lose champion select again. Thank you, u.gg, for supporting my Worlds content. Shout out to 100T. You guys got this next year. I believe in you. You just got to shore up this problem.